In this video we are going to add our main game character. So first we are going to create new package and call it entity. In that package we are going to create new Java class and call it Skippy. That is our main game character. So what does our game character need? It needs position and it needs collision circle. Later it will need speed, but for now let's first create collision circle and position. So first we have some attributes. Private final circle, collision, import circle from combat logic GDX math package, collision circle, private float x, that will be x position, and private float y, which is y position. Now we need some constructors. Public Skippy. In constructor we are going to initialize collision circle. Since that class is final, or that variable is final, we are not going to reassign new values. We will just change attributes of that class, like position of circle and so on. So first, collision circle is new circle with x and y position, but we also need radius. So in order to get radius, we are going to add two new constants into our game config. So first constant is the size of our character. Public static final float Skippy underscore size will be 3 world units. So this is also in world units. And we are going to calculate half size. Static final float Skippy underscore half size is Skippy size divided by 2. And this is also in world units. Remember, we need to think in world units. That will enable us to use viewports and it will be easier to handle multiple screen sizes. So now let's go back to our Skippy class and we can set the radius of our character, which is the half of the size of that character. So game config Skippy half size. And that is all that we need for now. But we need some setters and getter methods. So first we are going to create a little comment, public methods. First method that we need is to set position of our character. So public void set position, float x and float y. We are going to initialize our variable x to x and this y to y. But now we need to update the collision circle. Otherwise the circle will always be at 0, 0. Floats are by default 0. So if we initialize position of circle at 0, 0, and later if we set position of character to, let's say, 1, 1, the circle will stay at 0, 0. So that is why we need to update that collision circle. We are going to create method update collision circle. That method will be private. So we can add little comment private methods. There we are going to create private void update collision circle. And we are just going to set x and y of collision circle. So collision circle set x to x and collision circle set y to y. Now that we can set position of our character, we are going to draw our character in game screen. So we can move back to game screen. Inside game screen we have a render method. That method is called every frame. So we are going to create render debug method, which will render the circle or the collision circle that we have. But first, before we start rendering, we need to apply our viewport. So viewport apply, and after that we are going to call render debug. So render debug method, which will be also private method. So we can scroll to the bottom, create little comment private methods. There we are going to create private void render debug. When we render something with shape renderer, everything needs to be inside begin and end I assume that you already know that, so I'm not going to explain all the details. But first we need to call renderer set projection matrix to camera.combined. After that we are calling renderer begin with shape type line, and we need renderer.end. All drawing needs to be between begin and end methods, so between those two methods. Here we are going to call our method drawDebug, and below we are going to create private void drawDebug. There we are just going to render our collision circle for character, but first we need getter to get this collision circle. So in public methods block or below our set position method, we are going to create get collision circle. So you can just type GE and press enter. That will automatically generate our getter. In order to go back to game screen, we can quickly do it with keyboard by pressing Ctrl Tab, and then with arrows we can navigate. We need to go to the last edited class, which is game screen. So here we are going to get that circle and render it with shape renderer. All we need to do is call renderer.circle, and now we need to render the circle. So circle Skippy bounce, Skippy bounce, or Skippy collision circle is Skippy get collision circle. But first we need to add character to our game. So inside the game screen we are going to create a variable for our character. So right on top where are our attributes, we are going to create private Skippy and initialize it in show method. So Skippy is new Skippy, and we are going to set the position. But first we are going to set position to 0, 0. So Skippy set position to 0, 0. By default it is 0, 0, so we don't actually need to set it, but let it be there. Now we can call Skippy get collision circle inside our drawDebug method on the bottom, and all we need to do is just render that circle with shape renderer. So Skippy collision circle .x, Skippy collision circle y, and Skippy collision circle radius. You can call this variable however you want, for example C or circle, but I'm going to keep bigger names or longer names so it is easier to understand. And now when we have our character, we are rendering the collision circle. We can run our game and see that character is actually in game. Now you will notice that there is something, but we are not able to see it properly. The first thing is to add more segments to circle when we render it with shape renderer. So we are going to add 30 segments that will make a full circle. Sometimes if we have low world units and if our character is small, shape renderer won't render the full circle. It will render something like rectangle or rectangular object, and our screen or our game window is not in the size that we want. So in our desktop launcher, where we have this application configuration, we are going to set width and height to the sizes that we have in game config. So config.width is, we need to cast it to int game config.width, and the same goes for height. So config.height, again we need to cast it to int game config height. And now if we run our game, we should be able to see only quarter of the circle. I will explain why do we see only quarter. So you can see the quarter is there. We don't see the full circle. The reason for that is because the 0, 0 is bottom left corner. We are centering the camera in our resize method. We are telling viewport to update, and the last parameter true centers the camera, which automatically makes 0, 0 as the bottom left corner. So now our character is a bit too big. We are going to make it smaller later, and it is not at the right position. So we are going to position it at some other position. Instead of 0, 0, we are going to position it at quarter of width and half of height. Since we are working with world units, we can use game config world width divided by 4, and y position will be game config world height divided by 2, so that is half of the height. Now let's run our game again and see that we can actually see the full character or the full circle. Now you will notice the circle is there. It is a bit too big, but we are going to change that later.